The last train to Innsbruck, it was 11:47 p.m. The night was cold. The air was still. The dark sky was deep. The concrete platform was completely empty. No other people were there. No footsteps could be heard. Silence was everywhere. There was just one old wooden bench. The wood was dark from the age. The surface was smooth. The corners were rounded. There was one flickering yellow lamp. The light cast a faint glow. The shadow shifted slowly on the ground. A quiet hum came from the wire. And there was the sound of rain, a very steady sound of rain, falling softly on the old metal roof of a small, isolated Austrian station that most trains no longer stopped at. A forgotten place in the valley. The cold water dripped down. It fell from the edge of the roof. It made a clean rhythmic sound on the stones. Drop by drop by drop, a slow circle of sound. His name was Thomas. He was 53 years old. His hair was turning gray at the temples. His movements were deliberate and calm. He was a translator of old, forgotten books, a man of quiet thoughts, a man who liked the stillness of libraries, a man who appreciated the weight of paper. He had spent 30 long years of his life working with words in a dark room, turning other people as complex words into something completely new, into something perfectly calm, into a quiet rhythm that flows. On this cold night, he was carrying exactly one bag. The bag was made of dark leather. The leather was soft from many years of use. The metal buckle was scratched but clean. He had one old book in his hand. The cover was blue cloth. The pages were thick and heavy, and he had a small paper ticket to a distant city he hadn't visited in 20 years. The paper felt slightly rough between his fingers. The ink on the ticket was fading. The letters were small. Innsbruck. He looked at the small printed numbers. He looked at the empty tracks. The steel rails were wet from the rain. They reflected the yellow light of the lamp. Two straight lines going into the dark. The long train arrived exactly 4 minutes late. This minor delay was not unusual for November. November in this part of the country is always slow. The autumn air is too heavy with water. The fog rises from the cold earth. The trees lose their last leaves. The world prepares for the winter frost. The massive steel engine slowed down near the platform. It came to a halt with a long, low sigh of air. A soft cloud of warm steam rose from beneath the wheels. The white steam drifted up into the black sky. It blended perfectly with the cold night mist. It dissolved into nothingness. Thomas began to walk slowly along the side of the train. His boots made a quiet sound on the wet platform. Step by step by step, he looked at the black numbers painted on the dark green carriages. He found his designated compartment, seat number 6, car number 3. He reached out and slid the heavy wooden door open. The door moved smoothly on its metal rail. The interior of the compartment was warm, very warm and perfectly dry. The seats were covered in dark burgundy velvet. The fabric was slightly worn at the edges from many travelers. It looked soft under the light. It looked inviting. There was a small frosted lamp attached to the wooden wall. It cast a very soft, pale yellow light across the space. The light did not hurt the eyes. The light created a sense of safety. A large, clean glass window ran the full length of the seat. Thomas looked through the pane. Outside the window, there was only the absolute darkness, the deep darkness of the European night, and there was the cold rain moving sideways across the glass. The wind blew the droplets in waves. The drops formed long, slow patterns on the window pane. They ran down the smooth surface, one by one, tracing lines. Disappearing at the bottom, he lifted his heavy leather bag up with both hands. He placed it carefully in the wooden luggage rack above his head. He adjusted its position until it was perfectly balanced, until it was secure. Then he sat down slowly on the soft burgundy velvet. He placed his hands on his knees, and he exhaled. It was the kind of exhale that takes a very long time to finish, the kind of deep breath that carries years of accumulated fatigue away when it finally leaves the human body. A slow release of tension, a gentle letting go of the day, a quiet moment of transition. The train began to move forward after a short pause. The movement was barely noticeable at first. It was pulling away from the lonely concrete platform the exact way old, heavy things always move, with a small amount of hidden effort, then with complete, effortless ease. The tiny country station disappeared into the background. The single flickering lamp on the platform was left behind. The old wooden bench was swallowed by the dark fog. The station was gone, and then there was nothing else left to see outside, only the absolute, unbroken darkness of the vast Austrian countryside. Only the soft, comforting sound of the rain hitting the glass, and the steady, hypnotic rhythm of the heavy metal wheels on the iron tracks far below. Click, clack, click, clack. A constant sound, a calm beat. Thomas opened his old book on his lap. He did not actually read the black letters on the white paper. He did not focus his eyes on the sentences. He just held the heavy volume gently with his fingers and looked out into the vast, empty night beyond the window. The paper felt dry and warm under his hands. The mild scent of old ink and paper was very familiar to him. It was a deeply comforting smell, a smell of quiet spaces. There are very specific, hidden places in this wide world that exist only during the silent hours of the night, not because they physically vanish when the sun rises in the morning, but because the bright daylight changes their true nature into something far too ordinary and plain, into something noisy and rushed. The dark Austrian countryside at night in the late days of November is precisely one of those unique, magical places, a landscape of shadows, There are massive mountains outside the train that you cannot see at all. They are completely hidden behind the thick black clouds and fog, but you can distinctly feel their enormous, heavy mass in the darkness. You feel their ancient presence in the air. They stand like stone giants, silent observers, patiently watching the warm train pass by. There are small, distant villages with only one or two lit windows. They slide past the glass window like fleeting thoughts that you almost caught in your mind but did not quite hold onto in time. A tiny flash of warm light in a dark kitchen, an old lamp behind a curtain. Then the darkness returns instantly. There are deep, cold mountain rivers flowing through the valleys. You only know they are there beneath the train from the brief, hollow sound they make as the heavy carriage crosses a large iron bridge and then immediately leaves them behind in the thick mist. A low, deep rumble under your feet, a vibration in the floor. Then the soft silence returns. Thomas realized that he had completely forgotten about this specific feeling, or perhaps he had never properly paused his busy life to notice it before. He had been too occupied with his work, too focused on the bright hours of the day, too distant from the quiet wisdom of the night. At the far end of the long, quiet carriage, a heavy wooden door opened with a very soft click. An older woman walked slowly down the narrow carpeted aisle. Her long white hair was neatly pinned back away from her face. She wore a very long coat made of dark gray wool. The coat looked warm and heavy. She had a small dog tucked gently under her left arm. It was something very small and brown and deeply sleeping. The little dog's eyes were closed tight. Its tiny black nose was cold. Its small paws were completely relaxed against her coat. The woman stopped precisely at the empty compartment across from his. She looked up for a second at the small metal number on the wall. She sat down slowly into the corner seat without looking at Thomas. Her movements were gentle and quiet. The little brown dog did not wake up from the movement. It breathed in with a tiny sigh, and it breathed out, slowly, regularly. The woman reached into her deep bag and pulled out a small silver thermos. She carefully unscrewed the top lid. She poured some warm liquid into the plastic cap. It was something hot that steamed beautifully in the cool air of the car. A thin white spiral of steam rose up. The mild scent of herbal tea drifted slowly through the small space. A warm smell of chamomile flowers and sweet honey. She held the warm plastic cap with both of her hands. She let the warmth heat her fingers, and then she simply looked out of her own dark window, into the deep night, into the emptiness. There is a very particular, rare kind of quiet that exists only between complete strangers on a long night train. People who have silently and completely agreed not to disturb the deep peace of each other as minds. It is not an unfriendly or cold silence. It is, in fact, one of the most comfortable, healing silences a human being can ever find in this life. A safe space for the mind, to separate independent lives running perfectly parallel for just a few short hours in the deep dark of a moving world. Moving through the fog together, no long explanations are required here. No difficult social performance is needed, no polite, empty conversation is expected. There is just the deep, shared understanding that the train is safely moving forward on its tracks, and the night outside is very long, and that is completely enough for this hour. That is all that matters. Thomas allowed his thoughts to drift gently to the city he was going to, Innsbruck. The name sounded soft in his mind. He had lived there happily for 3 full years when he was a much younger man in his early 30s. He remembered the small, sunny apartment located right near the rushing mountain river. He remembered the quiet cafe where he went to read every single morning. The old wooden bridge he crossed twice a day, every single day. He had left that beautiful city because of a new job offer, or at least that was the story he had told himself over the years. The actual truth of the matter was far more complicated, in the unique, delicate way that truths involving another important person usually are. Memories are like long shadows. They grow much longer as the evening turns into night. He had not returned to that city since the exact day he left it. Not because he was physically unable to go, but simply because he kept not going, year after year, month after month. It was the exact way you keep not calling an old friend from the past, until so much time finally passes by that the simple act of not calling becomes its own kind of permanent, silent answer. An unwritten law of time. The train slowed down its speed slightly as it passed through another small station. The train did not come to a full stop. It just slowed down its movement enough so that Thomas could easily read the white painted sign on the platform wall. Schwarzach. It was an old name he did not know. A quiet place he had never seen in his life. He watched the lonely platform slowly slide past his window pane. An empty wooden bench under the rain. An old metal bicycle locked to a black post. A large round clock on the wall reading exactly 12:31. The big black hands of the clock were still. Then, the small station faded away into the mist, and there was only the deep darkness again. The steady, regular rhythm of the train returned to the carriage. Click, clack, click, clack. He looked down again at the heavy book sitting quietly in his lap. He was supposed to finish translating this text by the first week of March. There were many pages left to work on. It was a beautiful, deep novel written by an old Austrian author who had passed away in the year 1987. A remarkably quiet book about a patient, solitary man who spent an entire warm summer repairing old stone walls in a tiny, isolated village located high up in the Green Mountains. Absolutely nothing dramatic or loud happened in the story. Exactly. The plot was very simple and calm, and yet Thomas had already read it 4 times from cover to cover. The author possessed a unique, masterful way of describing the most ordinary, simple things in human life. The exact physical weight of a cold river stone, the distant sound of summer wind moving through a pine valley, the exact way the soft golden light moved across an old wooden floor in the very late hours of the quiet afternoon. Reading those slow descriptions made you feel as though you had been missing something very vital during your entire busy adult life. Not something large or expensive or dramatic, just something beautifully small, something that was always there, right in front of your eyes, that you simply had not stopped your movement to notice because you were always hurrying. Now, the night train was forcing him to slow down and notice. The older woman sitting quietly across the narrow aisle had gently fallen into a deep sleep. Her head rested softly against the cold window glass of the car. The silver thermos cap was still held loosely in her right hand. It was tilted slightly to the side, long since empty of its tea. The little brown dog shifted its weight just once under her arm and then settled back down deeper into the gray wool coat. It felt the warmth of the owner. Thomas watched them quietly for a brief, peaceful moment. There was something deeply, profoundly reassuring about the simple sight of a sleeping stranger, about a fellow human being who had completely decided that this moving steel train, this shared public carriage, this particular vast darkness outside the window was perfectly safe enough for them to close their eyes without any fear, to completely let go of personal control, to rest their mind, to trust the journey. He began to think deeply about the very concept of trust. How much of our daily, complicated human life is built entirely on a quiet, invisible agreement with many people we do not know and will never meet face to face. The silent, focused driver at the front of this long train, the old workers who carefully laid these heavy steel tracks many decades ago, the forgotten engineers who calculated precisely how much heavy weight a mountain bridge could hold during a winter storm. When you travel across the country, you never think about these things. You do not worry about them. You just board the dark train. You just ride along through the night. You just close your eyes and sleep. And somehow, that seems completely right and natural. The entire world functions best in the quiet hours. The cold rain outside the window had softened significantly now. It was no longer a heavy autumn downpour. The drops were tiny. It was more of a thick, gentle mountain mist drifting slowly across the dark window pane rather than cold water falling hard upon it from the sky. The air was peaceful. The great alpine mountains were finally becoming slightly visible in the distance. Not clearly or sharply, of course, just as giant, dark silhouettes. Darker shapes existing within the general blue darkness of the night sky, but they were unmistakably there. They were solid, they were permanent and true. Thomas had grown up very near to massive mountains just like these ones, but he had spent most of his adult life living in crowded, noisy modern cities, surrounded by concrete and cars. He had completely forgotten how these ancient stone giants made you feel inside your soul. Not small or unimportant, exactly. It was something much more specific and beautiful than that. It felt like a correct, natural proportion of things. Like the wonderful feeling of being exactly the right, peaceful size for the massive, ancient world you are living in. There was no pressure to be larger than you are. There was no need to be louder than your thoughts. Just a single point of peace in space. He suddenly remembered something his mother had told him a very long time ago. He was very young back then, maybe only 8 years old. They were traveling together on an old night train not unlike this one. She had looked out the glass window at the dark, endless fields passing by in the cool night, and she had said to him very softly, "The best thing about being on a long train journey is that you do not have to decide anything at all for yourself. Someone else is entirely responsible for driving us. The physical route is already completely chosen for you by the tracks. All you have to do in this world is just sit right here and rest." He had thought about that simple, wise statement many hundreds of times over the course of his adult life. It returned to him now, the immense relief of a fixed, unchanging route, of a powerful momentum that is not yours to maintain or worry about, of a continuous movement that asks absolutely nothing of you except to remain comfortably seated in your place and simply let the train carry you forward through the quiet night. His own eyes grew very heavy and warm now. He did not attempt to fight the heavy feeling of sleep. There was absolutely nothing to fight against in this car. The air was safe. The train compartment was perfectly warm and cozy. The soft mist outside the window was completely quiet. The ancient mountains were standing right there in the dark, solid, unhurried, majestic, and still. He would eventually arrive in the distant city of Innsbruck at exactly 2:18 in the quiet morning hours. He would slowly take a quiet taxi through the empty streets to his hotel. He would sleep deeply in a soft bed. He would wake up tomorrow morning to a beautiful mountain city he used to know so well. What exactly came after that morning, he had not yet decided or planned out. And maybe he realized that lack of a plan was perfectly fine. Maybe some important things in our human lives worked much better and brought more peace when you arrived at them without a rigid, heavy plan. Without any complex expectations, like a long train route that was already completely chosen for you. Like a grand stone mountain standing strong and silent in the dark night. Like a deep, peaceful, natural sleep, the heavy iron wheels on the track below kept their beautiful, steady, hypnotic rhythm. One low sound, then another similar sound, then another sound. It was perfected. It was steady. The train was not hurrying at all. It was just continuing on its way, moving slowly through the thick white mist, moving gently through the deep silent valley, closer to the mountains. Let your entire body become completely heavy now. Let the muscles relax. Let the shoulders drop. Let the steady weight of the moving train carry you forward. You do not have to decide a single thing tonight. The day is over. The tasks are finished. The route is already completely chosen for you. All you have to do in this quiet hour is just sit here comfortably. Close your eyes down, listen to the rails, and let it carry you forward. Into the absolute quiet of the autumn night, into the deep, peaceful, healing dark, into the beautiful, ancient mountains that were always standing there in the stillness. They are waiting for you. They are patient. They are perfect. They are completely still.